How do you deal with it if you've sold a business? Is there a clawback provision? Do you delay the payment of the purchase price until the last sale is hardened? How do you do that? These are things that unfortunately we can't answer today, but will come out of the operation of the Act. And if the National Credit Act is anything to go by, we know that the Act, when it was initially implemented, was a source of great concern and uncertainty for everybody, and it took a declaratory order out of the Gauteng division of the High Court to actually set out how the Act itself should work. And we fear that this might be the same kind of thing that will go on with this Act, that there will be this lacuna in how the Act will in fact work, and there will be these plethora of court cases with judges having to tell us how we should in fact regulate the Act. This next one, disclosure and information in the plain and understandable language requirement that you're entitled to as a consumer, has caused great consternation for anybody who operates in terms of a set of terms and conditions. This is a subject that we could debate for days. Is what's plain and understandable? Who is it plain and understandable to? What does plain and understandable even mean? How many languages do you need to have your plain and understandable language set out in? How do you deal with that when there are simply no foreign words for some of the words we use in the English language? How do we deal with that? The only thing I can suggest at this stage is, and this Act empowers us to be able to look to foreign legislation and foreign jurisdictions, is when having a look at how contracts and terms and conditions and any agreement should be drafted, I've been looking to the Office for Fair Trade in the UK, who set out a list of what they see as unconscionable and unfair contract terms and how contracts should in fact be worded. And I've used those to test and audit, for want of a better word, agreements that I now see for these unconscionable and unfair terms. The Department of Trade and Industry has promised us a so-called grey list of terms that they are going to frown upon. We wait for that. We've waited for the regulations for a while too. Fair and responsible advertising. Now, we've talked about bait marketing being forbidden, but one we'll get to it just now is who's in the supply chain of people that you can attack. And the advertising companies fit into the promotion of goods and services. So they are just as liable as the person who makes the product. So when they advertise a superior product, is it superior? Superior to what? We're going to have a relook at the way advertising takes place in South Africa. Because what is puffery, what's exaggeration, and what's a statement of fact that I'm now relying on when I buy this? Is it now the best of the best? If that's what I'm told, I'm going to rely on that. And for the supplier, manufacturer, promoter, wholesaler, retailer, it better be a superior product. Fair and honest dealings. Well, this was one that airlines fought vociferously about. In some of the, I don't know if all of you know how an act comes into being, but it starts off as a bill. Along the line, it becomes a bill. There's debates about whether those clauses should in fact be included in a new act. And in some of the bills before the act, there were areas where one could be held liable, a supplier could be held liable for consequential damages. And where the airlines were very concerned was there's been suggestions that there have been overbooking for years. So you would arrive at the airport, you would find that your flight, you'd been bumped from the 10 o'clock flight to the 11 o'clock flight, but you were in fact going to meet Richard Branson in Johannesburg to set up a new agreement, but it was going to be a pitch that you were going to take part in and one of your competitors was going to take part in. You missed the presentation, so you're out of the running. Consequential losses. Now, the mischief that could potentially create was, and the kind of litigation, unending litigation, was, in my view, too much. And thankfully, the airlines and others were successful in having those consequential losses limited. It simply, you wouldn't be able to run a business, I believe, if those were still in there. But they will still be liable in certain circumstances for your losses, your direct losses and damages that are caused. We've talked to the right to fair and reasonable contract terms and conditions. And those of you who are businessmen and involved in any good or service that you're supplying in terms of a written agreement, I'm not talking about a credit agreement because those will be covered under the National Credit Act, but I'm talking about you supply, you manufacture something, you supply it to somebody, or you're a retailer and you supply. You're going to need to go and audit your agreements for compliance with this and the other legislation that's around there. And again, we were talking beforehand is what does this mean? You know, you sit here at this talk this morning, you hear that you've got to go and do some audits. Yes, it's great. You remain slightly fearful to probably lunchtime. You then go out for lunch and you forget all about this. Okay? But those of you who are directors of companies need to be mindful of the legislation that's coming in October or later this year, being the new Companies Act, which has now codified the directors' duties and those people who should be considered as directors, i.e. senior officers in companies. You know that you have a duty to go back and look at these agreements, or your shareholders might suffer harm. Now, what does it mean if your shareholders suffer harm? It means that they potentially have a right of action against you if you've conducted yourself in circumstances where you should have conducted yourself differently. So you need to take this to heart. You need to go back today and either delegate to somebody or do yourself. Have a look and see where am I potentially requiring further information on this act and where am I requiring an audit on this act. It's the kind of thing that your professional advisors need to be advising you on and saying, do you realize that this legislation is in the offing? Do you realize that in your industry you should be looking at these things? But perhaps you're you run the Voyager Miles program for SAA. There's an entire section on loyalty programs. Perhaps you're the owner of a franchise. There is an entire section on franchises. Perhaps you work for a franchisor. Your rights between yourself and your franchisees just changed overnight. You need to take this to heart and go back and have a look at that. You have the right to fair value, good quality and safety. Now, fair value. Who's going to test whether something was correctly priced? I mean, there are things in this act which in my view, open things up to persons like presiding officers having to make decisions about things that they're simply not equipped to make decisions upon. So now what is it going to mean? Like anything else, expert evidence will have to be led. Who's going to pay for this now? Let's say you're not the consumer. Let's say you're the supplier. You're a big retail chain or a big manufacturing chain. You now need to look at what your budget's going to be for legal expenses next year. Because it's not just going to be the legal expenses. It's going to be the experts you're going to have to bring in to say, well, in fact, I run that corner convenience store and we can keep the yogurt for 3 days and we've taken swab tests about the cleanliness and hygiene that we've got going on here. And here is our expert who's going to come to court and tell us about this. What do you think these people are going to charge for this type of advice? And to stand in court for days and days and days. What do we do? How do we actually deal with it? Do we go to our insurance companies? That must be the answer. We must go to our insurance companies. But do our insurance companies at the moment, do they understand what the liability in terms of this act and how far it's going to go? We were debating that earlier. If you went to your insurance company now and said, I'd like you to cover me for any liability arising out of the Consumer Protection Act, do you think they'd give you cover? Probably not. If they did, they know more than you and I do, because we don't know where this act is going to. But one thing's for sure,